Hi, my name is Elvira Horvai with NewCrits, and I'm here today with Sara Greenberger Rafferty. NewCrits is a global platform for virtual art mentorship and community through interviews, texts, and so much more. So we're here today to explore what we mean by critique or crits and why they're so valuable. And we're using these videos for everyone to get to know the people of NewCrits. So my first question is, are there any ways that you like to conduct critique? And does that follow in the tradition of critique that you grew up in, or did you have to find a different path?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And trying to think about the word critique, I think it's always something that happens in community. And yes, I think the sort of DNA of the idea of critique, which is a community of artists helping other artists think critically and act critically in the making, presenting, and interpreting of artwork, is something that started, foundationally for me when I went to art school, but it's probably not something I grew up with in any way. I think it's just an evolution through the life of being an artist. Um, and I think it's part of a community um, dialogue, a community responsibility for us to, it's a kind of a lot of people call this kind of thing accountability. It's in different fields. I think probably critique has, as a word and as a process, has a deep intellectual background, maybe literary and art, but it's interchangeable with any of these things. And my touchstone for any of it is to be of help, to be of service, to be in service. And then I know we have a limited time, but just to think about one-on-one, I really like to think of it more as a studio visit. And I use that kind of nomenclature a little bit more than critique when it's one-on-one. Not because two people can't be a community, but because it's a little bit more of a intimate dynamic.
Right, thank you. And going off of that, um, what do you see as the value in critique?
Yeah, so I think the value um, for an artist, let's say there's a critiquer and a critiquee, of course, it's always relational. And I believe in, attempting to um, dissolve the hierarchy or dissolve the power structure. And yet I do have a certain expertise, experience, or knowledge that someone might want to talk to me about. Um, I think that the value for the, let's say, the critique the artist who's coming to NewCrits, is not only to hear someone speak about their work and tell them what about the work is important or interesting or working, not working, all of these words, but it's to hear yourself speak and take account of the work almost even more. And in that sense, there is a psychoanalytic dynamic to it, even though, let's say, that's not my mode. Like, my mode is not a psychoanalytic mode 100%. It's mixed in there, but I think this sort of blank slate or mirroring uh, analogy is really adept, because whenever I'm speaking about my work to someone, sometimes I surprise myself in things that I wouldn't even think of myself in the studio, in taking account or in becoming accountable or in having this like partnership, this dialogue. So for me, the most important thing is, as the artist who is being critiqued, to use that word, um, is is taking account and pushing against questions, queries, statements, thoughts, and having a kind of resistance to work with, to understand what you think you're doing.
Right, right. That's such a good way to put it. Can you tell us about a project that changed its direction through conversations with other artists?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not a project that hasn't changed through conversations with other artists. One of the things that other artists can do, because they, you know, that they have that same experience as you. So I think a lot of times, um, you know, you want to know that someone has experience of working through the problem solving, of wrangling ideas that are, um, philosophical, emotional, intellectual, intuitive, material, um, engineering, all of these things that people have made that kind of magic, in their own sense. And so you asked me about the experience. I mean, there's not really a single work that I've made authored by me that has not been made in conversation with my community. That's very internalized in my studio. It might not be a formal Zoom like this or a formal studio visit, even, but it's something that's internalized through decades now of being, um, consorting with artists and being in dialogue with artists. So it's one of the most beautiful things about being an artist, the way your work is affected by other artists you talk to.
Yeah. And at what point in your process do you find yourself in need of feedback?
Yeah, I think, usually for me, I recently have come to think of my work as being, um, an artist who makes exhibitions, more than identifying as this kind of artist, like a painter or a photographer or drawer or whatever. And so for me personally, the most crucial moment is once there's, a good amount of work or a good amount of iteration or a good amount of trial and error or a good enough like volume of things to talk amongst themselves, to bounce off each other, but not quite ready for the exhibition, and maybe need some dialogue to bring in the, bring it all home, you know, to finish. So maybe between 50 and 75% done.
Right. And the last question is, where do you find inspiration?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of being an artist is incredible, discipline and, incredible involvement in feeling the world and perceiving the world deeply. So, I think for me, I always think of the inputs maybe aren't direct to the outputs being my work, but, I do read a lot, and that's fiction and nonfiction. Um, I see shows. I actually, maybe it's an unpopular opinion for an artist, but I love art. I love art history. Um, so I and I love learning, and, um, those are the life forces beneath myself as a person and as an artist, which sometimes can be indistinguishable. Um, so, you know, I think I it's a lot internal in my brain. It's not like I have a athletic practice or, something like that, which maybe sometimes I wish I did. But it is a lot of film, a lot of reading, and a lot of, dialogue. And I'm very, very inspired by New York City, where I live.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.